Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 63, Building Better Websites, Solving Pain Points, Examples from the Trenches. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast if you love business and real stories from the trenches. And after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share if we've earned it. Hit that notification bell too if you're on YouTube so you don't miss each episode. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable From the Trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hi again. How are you doing? So there's a theme forming here. My last episode was about design. This episode is actually going to be about websites as well, but from the perspective of pain points, if you didn't notice already from the title. And I'll define what that is, how, for this context, and kind of dig into some examples of that I run into or have run into in the past, just to kind of give you some insights into how we approach that and how we try to tackle those things. It's just part of what we do when we get a client, a brand new client, or a brand new project, wherever that project comes from. One of the things forefront in my mind is to identify the issues they're having currently. Now, especially if it's an actual existing site that we're dealing with. So let's say they have a site that was built 8 years ago and it's looking a little out of date. Maybe they're having some issues. We need to identify that first. Like, what is your website now? So this is an example of a question I might ask, is like, what is an issue you're having right now with your website? What's your main issue? What are you trying to solve? And that might be why they're talking to us, right? Because generally we don't talk to somebody about rebuilding their website unless they're having some kind of issue. If they don't like what they already have. If everything was perfect, they wouldn't be talking to us. I mean, certainly this is also in the context of it's not just in the context of actually building a website from scratch or just redoing a website. It might just be from the context of maintenance or improving a website. And I think throughout these examples, I'll talk about some, current or past clients or projects and what we were doing for them and why we were doing things for them and what the scope of that is. Sometimes it's not rebuilding something from scratch. It's just improving on what they have. Not necessarily a new coat of paint, but it might be something to solve a pain point in their process or their business, something their website's not doing well for them or they're having issues with on a regular basis. So that's what we're getting into today. So I'm just going to dive right into that. I'm not going to talk about anything else. I can talk about all the things I'm doing, how crazy it is around here, but I'll save you this episode. Get into that stuff. Now I want to dive right into this. I think first of all, let's kind of define when I say pain points, what does that mean? And it can be defined differently ways depending on how you're helping somebody or what your pain points are. It's in the context of business generally and your website. It's a persistent, I actually created a little description here so I didn't have to think of it on the fly. So I wrote this: pain points are persistent problems with a product, service, website, or your business in general that impacts your brand, conversions, or things similar to that, right? It's impacting something negatively in your business. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And again, in the context of websites, because that's what I do, right? My whole world is websites. It's not even, some of what I do, there's an external component to it, but most of it's internal on page. These are the things that we're solving for people. It could be related to the design, how things are built, their contact form. It could be related to, their CTA. It could be related to the underlying code. or the server. There's some problem there that we need to identify. So, and the thing about pain points is a pain point, an issue, may not be an issue for you. It may exist, but it's not an issue for you, right? Everything's about priorities in business, right? Depending on what you're doing and where you're at and what we're talking about, it's different for every individual, every business. Something that is an issue with you, you might be able to ignore and not worry about. But as a business, the scale of the business, if you're talking about a business that's not, that's getting like 100 plus transactions a day through their WooCommerce site, or, making millions of dollars in revenue a year, those little problems can really be magnified on that scale, but if you're only getting a couple sales a day, it's not as big of an issue, or if that revenue from that site isn't the biggest piece of your revenue, maybe maybe you're diversified into other things, or it's just one of many sites, and you have to prioritize everything. And so it may not be a priority for you. But the things I'm going to talk about today were impactful, I think, for the most part. I bulleted about 7 pain points, 6, 7, 2, 4, 6, 7, that I'm going to touch on. Each one of these actually stems from a real life example. I may or may not I probably won't mention the client. I generally don't. And we could in maybe 1 or 2 cases, but we do a lot of white label work. In other words, white label work is like basically we're behind the scenes. So for all intents and purposes, so if we're working for another agency or something, doing work for them, their clients, they don't care or know that we're actually doing the website side of things. So because that's not our client, our direct client, generally can't share those things. And considering that's a big part of our business, so there's a lot of web design projects and stuff that we do, but I can never share with you. That sucks. But on a general sense, I can. I can generalize and give you an example in a situation, and the lessons we pull from that. So that's what this is about too. It's about those lessons. So when we sit down with the client again, so if there's depending on, again, the scope and what we're doing, if it's just one feature we're trying to solve something for, or if the whole website thing, we're going to either talk to or email with the client, figure out what that thing is, and then we create a plan. How are we going to solve it, right? Are we going to solve it? Is it a little coding issue? Is it just a design issue that we have to resolve? Is it, what is it? And then from there, and once in a while, it's not our problem. It turns out it's somebody else's problem, right? Just a simple question or a simple example from this past day. Somebody sent me, they had a client that has a form that's having issues on mobile or something, right? And I looked at the form, but the form is actually created by this third-party site. Like, the first step is to go to them and ask for support, because I don't know anything about this form. So maybe it's not our problem. Maybe it's somebody else's. But those are the things we identify, and then we reply, we communicate, hey, do this first, or this is the stuff we'll need to solve that problem. Again, we're kind of in the problem-solving business. That's part of what I love about what I do, right? Is I love to solve problems. I always have. I have a lot of my own problems, but I solve other people's problems too, right? So, we're in, because people don't come to us, again, if I think I said earlier, they don't come to us when everything's perfect. So let's start with problem number 1, pain point number 1. We rely heavily on Google traffic for a majority of our revenue. But our site is really slow. And Google likes fast sites. That's it in a nutshell, right? And not only Google likes fast sites, your visitors like fast sites. And if you want to not have high bounce rates, one of the factors there is having a site that loads quickly. It's easy to navigate and everything else, but it loads quickly. When you first go there, boom, it's there, right? So that is a pain point that we had a client this past year. We've had other clients. We've had multiple clients with speed issues. Speed issues actually a very common issue. So especially in the realm of WordPress. So and Shopify too. We've worked on Shopify sites for speed. There's identifying. It's looking at the site as a whole. It's a holistic thing, and it may not be solving one issue in that case. Right? This is their pain point. They're having an issue, or there's a change in the algorithm, and they know that speed is going to be more important, or whatever. So we have to solve this for them. And so we have to assess. We do basically an audit of the site and make sure and see what could be causing this problem. If there's something that really jumps out, we'll solve that. But generally, it's a matter of priorities, and it's a collective thing because it's not only one thing that contributes to speed. It's many things. And sometimes, like before, it's not always on us, right? Or we identify what the cause is, and we say, we can't do anything about that because you're using this third-party app. Especially this happened on the Shopify, where there's a third-party app and there's not really any other solution for that. We're not going to build something custom. We could maybe, but in that case, we're going to have to either figure out: do you need this app? Do you need this app or this plugin for WordPress? Do you need it? And that's one of the assessments. When you look at a site, it's very easy to add a lot of plugins. But over time, it's important to go back and revisit those and say, do we need that plugin? Is it contributing to the performance of our site, et cetera, et cetera? Could be other things. It could be related to the code. It could be related to, how things on the code side are served up. It could be server related. It could be a variety of things. So that's what we have to figure out. And it's not a one singular fits all answer. It depends on the platform. It depends on all these other factors, how old the site is, how it's built. So that's one pain point that we could identify, and then we have to create a roadmap to do that. And again, it may be incremental over time. We're going to start here, prioritize, do this, and this, or we'll have to experiment, right? We may have to experiment as well. And because sometimes you don't know how large of an effect it is. For example, it makes sense. Okay, we should optimize the images. The images are too big on this page. And then you optimize them, but it really only had a really tiny impact. And it's really something else. So that's pain point one. Pain point number two. Our website gets hacked a lot. We work with a lot of clients. We work with a lot of websites. And actually, if the site is done, especially in WordPress, right? If the website's done right, approached right, and all security measures are in place, it doesn't get hacked very often, if ever. Knock on wood, because I have a lot of websites out there. And I work in WordPress a lot. So you understand that 90+% of what we do is WordPress. We do other stuff, Shopify, we may be doing other frameworks and stuff out there, but a bulk of what we do. And WordPress is notorious for getting hacked and having security issues. But a lot of that comes down to making sure the site's up to date, making sure the plugins are up to date, making sure you don't have a plugin Here's the thing with a plugin. Just because it says there's no update doesn't mean the plugin's updated. Because you might have a plugin that's not the developer's abandoned, right? And it's sitting there with old code that's insecure. So things like that, through experience, you figure out, you learn, right? And same with themes, right? Or there's other things you can do on a security side of it, where there's plugins, there's security plugins like WordFence and Security and others. But those things are things that are going to solve that pain point. But the pain point is, of course, our site gets hacked a lot. And obviously, again, it's magnified by the size of the site and your revenue. If some people might have a hacked site, and I know they do. I've had hacked sites in the past, and I've known people who have had hacked sites, and it can be hacked for days or weeks, and you don't know because you don't have stats coming in where you're getting a lot of leads or a lot of sales and stuff, and it's just a content site or something that's just sitting there and you don't pay attention to it. And you have no mechanism in place that can tell you if it's down or whatever, or has issues. So, that's something with this too. There's tools you can use that will tell you a lot of information and give you alerts and stuff if something changes on the site and all that. So our site gets hacked a lot, can really have an impact on revenue. So if I'm listening to a client, they say, that's probably what they're going to lead with. And yeah, that's what we'll solve. We'll go through, again, it's going to start with an audit. What's the issue here, figuring out what that is and identifying where we start and going from there. So that's number 2. Number 3, our site crashes regularly. I don't know why I can't read that. Our site crashes regularly. That's number 3. So it's kind of like, it could be because it's getting hacked, for sure. So it's kind of could be related to that. But if it crashes a lot, it could be a lot of other things. It could very likely be something on the server side. So I had a site this past summer that we got. We help them with maintenance regularly now, a monthly contract. But when I first initially got the project, I had to go through a lot of hoops and to learn about the site, because they had the business itself really didn't have any documentation or really even know where their server was or what type of server it was. So that was something I had to go through. On the other side of it, there were some things out of date and all that stuff. So again, it's a matter of going through this kind of audit with, looking at the site, talking with the client. And in that case, what were you doing when it crashed? They actually, that particular one, they would, anytime they had a front end developer or somebody helping with content. And there was a point where it was like every time they would like update the content or update a page, FTP or whatever, or maybe it was in the admin, it would crash. It would go offline. And I remember talking to the owner of the site, or the one that manages the site, and she's like, they had whole like days the site was down and they couldn't figure out how to get it back up. Right. So that again is the process of us, number one, trying to patch immediately what is causing that, identify it, figure it out, but then having this kind of, again, holistic approach to managing their site now going forward. So we can get it in a state where it's regularly updated, because a lot of those plugin, WordPress especially, a lot of those plugin updates and stuff are security updates or updates to WordPress. So you have to make sure there's a reason for them, because somebody is exploiting something or other. So it's important to do that. So have a good routine to keep the site up to date, identify bugs, issues, and all that stuff, and just keep a good eye on the site, really. And then keeping the backups and stuff. If that does happen, you can easily recover quickly. So again, that's a big pain point people have, is my site crashes. It might be the type of server. In this case, it wasn't. They were on a VPS already, virtual private server. So it was not really dedicated, but it's better than shared. Sometimes it's a shared host, and who knows how good that host is or who it is. So that could be a problem too. But there's a lot of other people on the same server using the same resources, and somebody on that server is spiking things and causing the server to crash. It's not you at all, but it's somebody else on the server that's got a bad situation. So all that stuff has to be identified. So let's go to number 4. This is probably super common and everyone wants to do it. We need to improve conversions and generate more leads. And now, here's the thing with us, right? Even though I have a marketing background, I've run businesses forever and websites, I don't do marketing for clients generally. I, however, will suggest things, right? I can talk marketing. Okay, I don't sell, let's rephrase this a little bit. I don't sell marketing. I don't sell sales. I don't sell SEO. I don't sell pay-per-click advertising, none of that stuff. But I may talk about it because I have a background in it, right? And I work with a lot of sites and a lot of clients that do all those things, right? So I may have some insights. So when somebody says, when somebody's talking about their conversions or their, having a better call to action, CTA situation, I'm going to be able to help them. So a lot of times this is probably related to the CTA and how they're, how that's built and designed and how prominent it is, how and all these other factors, but it's asking the question, what is your goal? What action do you want somebody to take when they land on this page? How are we, what type of leads are you looking for? Now, again, I'm not selling lead systems. I'm not doing all that, but I can advise somebody and be like, because with traffic, it's not always the website, right? You might actually have a perfectly good contact or, CTA, I'll just call it a CTA, a button that says go sign up or go get this or download this or whatever. It may be fine, but the traffic you're getting isn't targeted, right? Traffic there's every flavor of traffic out there. You can get very untargeted traffic. You can get very targeted traffic. Somebody's searching on your brand name, like a lot of people search on unified web design. I see that in my logs, right? And they already know who I am, right? So that conversion rate's going to be a lot higher. But otherwise, if somebody's like, some other random keyword that has nothing, that barely has anything to do with web design, that's probably not going to convert well, right? So a lot of it's just, and it may even be mentioning that, but usually there's always something to improve on the site, though. Usually, whether it's the color, even the color of the button matters, right? Where it's positioned on the page, that headline or whatever. Again, we're not copywriters, but I may say, use a different headline, or you need a better incentive for people to. Those are things that we can mix in there when we're conversing with a client. But hopefully, we work with a lot of people. Most of our clients, we have clients that are agencies, so they're marketing and advertising agencies. I don't need to worry about it with them. Clients I work with oftentimes have their own in-house marketing department, sales department, or somebody handling advertising and all that. So again, the benefit with me is I can talk to those. I know the domain, right? So I can have really good conversations about translating what they need. So we can help with that. So that is, sitting down with a client, we're talking about this beautiful design, that needs to look a lot better, more modern, let's use more spacing. And then they keep coming back. Yeah. Like for some reason they keep talking about, lead generation. So maybe we need to, even though we're talking about all this other stuff, the footer and different pages, maybe we need to talk more about that form that's capturing names or whatever. So there you go. So number 5, we spent $20,000 earlier this year to get our site redesigned and built. And we hate the design. I know this is going to surprise you, but that's an actual conversation I had. That is an actual true to life conversation I had. It was later in the year. It was like, I think it was like January or something that year. They had an agency launch this new site and she hated the design. And it's not funny. It's like I laugh about it, but it's not funny for them, obviously, right? It's a serious situation. And I'm not going to laugh with, obviously, when I talked to her, I was not laughing. I'm like, that's not good. Or I'm like, that's not good. Whatever I said, I'm sure it was empathetic, right? Because that's a lot of money to spend on something you don't like. And in that case, it was the fact that this agency or the developer, whoever did the site, she had just a really hard time communicating the design side. They built, I think they were good coders, web developers, but the design side she couldn't communicate. So that was the immediate pain point, right? I need a better design. I just spent all this money. Now, the problem is they're not going to pay me all this money to redesign the whole site and rebuild it. It wasn't in the budget, right? They just burned through their budget. So what I ended up doing is sitting down, okay, this is your problem, okay? And specifically, she was going to be doing an advertising campaign and she needed a landing page. She wanted to create a nicer landing page. At the same time, this landing page should improve the design. So what I did, that landing page that I designed actually leaked into some other areas of the site, or specific elements like their forms and stuff. So I redesigned their form, which would pop up on other parts of the site. But I did a kind of a complete redesign, but redesigned it enough where it would actually sort of blend still with the new bad design. But it would give them a kind of a template, a roadmap to then roll that out slowly out throughout the site as they got the budget, right? And so we built that site, coded it, landing page, WordPress, and she loved it. And for all I know, they drove traffic to it and made lots of conversions, right? But so now it's like I'm waiting for that email or whatever to say, okay, we want to improve this page or do this other stuff. So that's another great example of a situation where it was an obvious pain point. Usually pain points are obvious in a conversation. Like I said, we're redesigning the whole site, but what is their issue? And let's start there, and then we'll still do everything else, but that's going to be a big focus for us. So that was an interesting one. And a little bit of pressure on me, like hopefully I can translate her vision, and luckily I did. So she was happy. So next one. This is a really important one. Maybe not verbalized as much, but it's certainly something I verbalize when I'm telling somebody I'm going to build their site. But it has been recently. Let me think. I remember a conversation recently. I don't remember which project it was. It was a recent project. Can you tell me, please, somebody out there? Essentially, maybe I'll think of it as I'm talking about it. Essentially, somebody had a website that was very difficult to. Oh, I know what it was. Okay, So we redesigned this whole site, but one of the pain points was certainly the fact that they had a hard time updating the site and with content. So out of the box, it was like we want to be able to update the content. It sounds simple, especially if you're in a content management system, but a lot of developers can do things that are not simple. So every developer is different. Some architect things better than others. Some think about the customer first. Some don't. This is other things, but I've inherited themes that were built because it was good for the developer. They used a framework. They were a really nice, quick way to build this site out and blah, blah, blah. But it was not friendly for It was not friendly for the customer, the user, the owner of that site, but it was also not good for other developers because they used a very unique build for this theme. So it was not, so the people that did update the theme basically hacked it. They didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't have the experience. So that was what, in that case, I had to like bring that back from a dark place. But anyway, so I digress. But yeah, but content it's really important to be able to update it. So like with WordPress, we've leveraged different things over time. I used to leverage the customizer a lot to make it easy to update content like the front page and stuff. The customizer is being phased out, so it's not really the thing that I'm focused on anymore. Another thing though that has a plugin that I've used that really helps with content, giving power to the customer after we deliver it to update their own content is ACF, Advanced Custom Fields. It's an incredible plugin. Actually, Advanced Custom Fields has a great built-in way to do block development as well. It's a little easier than custom block development. That is definitely something that that we use a lot in our projects. Maybe that changes a little bit now that we're doing more block theme development, more full editing situation, because that's all blocks. So if it's all blocks, we may not need to use ACF. But it's something that right away I immediately hear that, and in that case we're doing it anyway. So I'm just gonna make them feel at ease and say, "We got you." We got you. That's all. This is what we're going to do when we deliver it. And anytime I deliver a theme or a website to somebody, I want to give them the keys and they can go, and I'm going to show them, just like you buy a new car, I'm going to show you around. This is how things work. I may have to give you a doc. I'll go through all the settings. I'll go through, how the site is built so that from that point forward, you can drive the site. I just remember, my wife got a new car last year after she got her car. Somebody hit her and totaled her car. She got a new car, and cars today have so many bells and whistles. It's insane. And I just remember we sat there for an hour with the salesman going through all the things. My wife, she's, I love my wife. She's not technically savvy, and she'll tell you that. So, and it was a situation where just tell me what I need to know. There's a lot of stuff here. We don't need to know everything. Just what are the main things we need to know? Anyway, I digress. So content is a thing. And then, and like I said, because we do it, in that case, we're not going to figure out what we're going to do there. We're going to say, this is what we're doing. Right. And we will, when we deliver it to you, you will know what you need to know to update the site. Now, of course, there's a caveat to that, if that's the word. I'm pretty good at English, but sometimes I use words very little, and caveat sounded like a good word. If there's situations where if I hand it off, so I build a site for their needs today, but businesses, especially if they're growing, their needs change over time. So we may have to come back in as developers to help them build out a new section, a new page, or do other technical stuff. But in terms of the content itself and the way the site is today, they should be able to handle most of the content related stuff, unless it's something real special. So last one we're going to go over, and this kind of actually ties into, I alluded to this project earlier. It was the project where somebody built the site really quickly. It was easy for the developer, but it was not easy for future developers or even us. But we figured it out and changed the situation. So every time a developer touches our site, something gets messed up somewhere else. So we have this is actually a current client of ours, one of our larger clients, and they got an e-commerce store. They do a lot of business, and one of the reasons I got the business was it was referred to me. It was a referral, and a friend of mine referred this person to me. They had done work for him in the past, and they couldn't help him right now because they're off doing their other thing. And so I talked to this person, and there was an immediate problem. There's something with, they have a video on the front page. There was some issue with that video not displaying right. And I went in, I was able to fix it pretty quickly. Identified the issue, fixed it, and he was super happy. And obviously, I don't even know what it is. I think we've been helping him for a good part of a year, 8-9 months more. But we went in, we solved that issue, and then that turned into a long-term client. But the problem was one of the problems that they were having, that particular problem, they said the developer was working on it for like 2 days or something. Then I went in and fixed it in like an hour. That doesn't always happen, by the way. I'm not that smart. Or maybe, I don't know. I don't know why I fixed it so quick. But it was a good thing. But what would happen was he had these other, I don't know who he was outsourcing to specifically, but he called him later on. He'd always refer to him as like the nightmare. But whatever, they would fix something, or they would try to fix something else on the site would be messed up. Right? So let's say they're fixing some, feature on the front page, and somewhere in the back page, maybe in the cart or something messes up or whatever, whether it's styling or functionality or whatever. And, we've solved, the problem was that the theme, again, was built, it was the developer, the original developer was fancy. He didn't do anything wrong necessarily, right? He built the site using modern methodologies, JavaScript methodologies, build methodologies, whatever you want to call it. He did it. But what happens is, and this is something that's also important, when we hand off a project, we want to make sure that client knows, is given documentation or knows how we built it. Because future developers, because we may not be the developer on that site a year from now or 3 years from now, oftentimes we're not, right? If we just built the site and, whatever, that was the same in this case. Maybe they helped them a little bit over time, but they went off, got a job, or whatever they did. I don't know. And they couldn't help them anymore. Well, now other developers have to help. The other developers don't know anything about this framework they use to build the theme. They used Vue. It was using WebKit, Webpack, and some other creative. There was a CSS framework they used. It was just like this whole build process to manage the site. Well, when you have somebody in there that can't identify those things and see it for what it is, they're just going to throw code everywhere. So there was JavaScript code and different files, and nothing was compiled, and things that were supposed to be compiling now couldn't be compiled because they hacked like some minified code. It was a mess. That's something. So that was one of my first jobs, is to clean all that up, and then kind of roll back that framework a little bit and make it easier for us to manage. But that was a situation. So because of that, because it could have been the skill set of the developers, where it is something you have to think about when you do update something. You have to ask yourself, and with this experience, you'll understand what this could possibly affect. I'm saying, I have somebody developing a plugin right now. Another example, we're creating a unified tweaks and more, or something like that. It'll be called. But she had developed, when I installed it on the site to test it, I looked at one of our post types, or one of our post lists, and all the excerpts were missing. I was like, what does that have to do with the plugin? Because it was a completely different functionality. Anyway, but something she had done had this kind of ripple effect on something else, completely random. So that does happen. You have to know why that happens. The other thing that, and I'm going to kind of close it out with this. The other really important thing we did for this client was, so before they were on a different server. We moved them to a new server environment entirely. So that was part of the assessment, the audit. We need to move you to a different server. Their server wasn't handling the volume. And so we moved them to a cloud server that's scalable and blah, 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 auto scales. But one of the things that we did is we implemented a staging system so that we can, because before what they were doing, they just had a live site. So I don't know if someone was working locally or not, but things were being pushed live. So, and that's just, it's a matter of time. Some issue's going to occur. So every time the site would be updated, the owner of that site, he's always on top of his site. I mean, there's revenue, right? So every day he's on his site. He's looking at that site and he's making, especially if he knows something was updated, he's going to look probably on the whole site, make sure there's no issues, especially in the cart. And he would always find stuff. So there's coding reasons behind the scenes why that was happening. It could be experience, but now it's a situation where we do the changes. We actually have multiple. We have development environment, we have staging environment, and because we're usually working on, this is a complex project, we're working on multiple things at once, plus keeping the site up to date. But now we can test those things first, right? We've solved some coding problems, some issues. Some of those issues were sometimes cache-related issues. So we have a much better setup for their cache, and where when they update the site, it wouldn't update the cache. He's in a browser cache and stuff. It wouldn't refresh. So, all those little things all add up. But now it's in a beautiful place. We have a really great system. We got, I have help with it as well with the developer, and I work on it. And we have a good process of being able to work on new features, new requests, while at the same time having another parallel development path where we're keeping the plugins up to date. So there's no issues there. Yeah, but that was a major, major pain point. He has developers. He's got to rely on the developers. Can't do it himself. He doesn't know anything about code. So you're relying on developers. Maybe he tried multiple developers, and all of them were messing up the theme, and he couldn't understand why. And this one actually also is related to the speed. There was some of that stuff related to the speed of the site. So there was this comprehensive thing that we had to worry about. But ultimately, yeah, there was a lot of issues. Anyway, I could talk about that project forever. Okay. So that's what pain points are. And so when you if you're, let's look at it from two perspectives, the business and the freelancer agency. If you're a business and you're talking to somebody that is going to build a feature for you, or refresh your site, improve your site, or rebuild it, redesign, rebuild it, talk about, if they don't bring up your pain points. Make sure they understand what it is, because just saying we need our site redesigned doesn't really tell the designer much, right? Or the developer much. So it's important to be very specific. So again, going back to that, going back to the one where I talked about that one today, I might have talked about that last time. Somebody had a form on a site, and that it was related to lead generation stuff was their pain point, really. So as I identified what that was and how they wanted that developed specifically, they gave me a reference to a site that does it well. We figured that stuff out. So if you have ideas around, or something you want to solve, you want to get more leads, you want to get more sales, or something happens, make sure you communicate that. Now, if you're a freelancer agency, you should be trying to tease out those things and asking. And just like that, what's your pain point? So you have this existing site. We're going to do this work for you, but what are we trying to solve? It's not just making a prettier looking form or CTA. We just don't want to change the colors and maybe have a better font, maybe a better background, maybe a better incentive. But really, what are we trying to solve? Is it the type of lead you're getting, or is it spam? You're getting so much spam. Is there a way to solve that? There's a lot of possible issues, but try to tease that out, and that's going to make the customer, the client, much happier as well, because they'll know people like to be listened to and to have their problems solved. Sometimes, it's, if you, as a developer or designer, freelancer, agency, if you identify a solution to the problem, sometimes the client doesn't know they have a problem. Okay, I'm going to leave you with this. I can't say I'm going to leave. I'm going to close this out with this. This is probably a couple of years ago already. I had a client that, it was through an agency. It was an agency's client. So we had an agency partnership. We were doing a development, helping with this particular website, and they had a form. They had a countdown timer, something on that website, right? And it was a regular count. They always had the countdown timer, but they always had to reset it, like every 6 months or something, 3 months. But the way it was coded, it was hard coded. So every time they needed to update that timer, they needed to call the developer or the agency, and the agency would say, Matt, we need this updated. And I probably was a couple times when I realized, this is something. I said this to the agency. I said, this is something we can solve for them. And this is what we can do. And this is how long it'll take. Just a couple hours. And then they can update it themselves. And in that case, we did leverage ACF, Advanced Custom Fields. We created a field for that integrated with a script, a field for the date and time. And now every time the client needs to update that, they just do it themselves. They don't have to pay me the hourly to do that for them. So that was a pain point they didn't know they had. It's a bonus lesson for you. Okay. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what your pain points are. I'll help you solve them. Have a great one. Till next time. That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already, and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.